Hi there. Welcome to another episode of Hired, where we speak with incredible leaders about their unconventional journeys to success. I'm your host, Mike Thompson, and on today's show, we welcome Amy Keller Laird, founder, chief brand and creative officer of Mental. Speaking with Amy was a joy. We cover topics like her love of performance, pursuing and achieving her childhood dream of becoming editor-in-chief of the globally acclaimed Women's Health, and her journey with mental health, which fueled a passionate advocacy for social change, ultimately leading to the creation of her company, Mental. We have a lot to cover in this episode, so without further ado, let's meet Amy. Okay, we are recording. So, Amy, take me back to the beginning. What was childhood like? Where did you grow up? What was the house like? What did mom and dad do for a living? Siblings? Paint me a picture of childhood.
It was a pretty idyllic childhood, honestly. I grew up in Missouri, in the middle of Missouri, Columbia, Missouri, which is a very multicultural town, 3 universities, not like the rest of Missouri. I just feel the need to say that because Missouri is often on the wrong side of history. But my dad's a professor of computer and electrical engineering at the University of Missouri. Go Tigers. My mom was a nurse, but became a stay-at-home mom and raised my sister and I. I have one sister who is 3 years younger. We had the cat, I don't know. It was like I'm pretty sheltered looking back on it. I don't know. We played in the woods. I was doing a TikTok the other day and somebody was like, "Remember those days when we used to just be able to go into the woods?" It's like, yeah, I do. Like there were woods down the street from one of our houses and we just go there and be gone for hours and it was fine. We moved to a different house in 6th grade, and the people who lived across the street, we used to play with them all the time. It sounds weird to be playing in 6th grade, but we literally would have like Monopoly fests. This is back when you had to rent movies, so we'd like walk to the local Osco, which was like a local CVS kind of, and rent movies and do all that. I don't know. It was like pretty
Interesting. So
sheltered.
your dad being a professor, was school really important when you were growing up? Was that like an emphasis in the household, like get good grades? Like was that kind of ingrained in you at an early age?
For sure. My dad has an amazing work ethic, probably one of the strongest, as well as a sense of justice in terms of people being recognized and getting their due. And that has been like fully ingrained in me. I definitely have. It's interesting. A lot of people who moved to New York from Missouri, and a lot of people actually did because the journalism school at the University of Missouri is in one of the top 3. It's the first journalism school in the country. I went there. So a lot of people who moved to New York from Missouri were all had this like kind of intense work ethic because we had come from the middle of Missouri and we moved to New York and we were like, we got something to prove. But
Mm.
I don't know if it's because my dad was a professor or just my parents. Definitely school was prioritized. I was a straight A student. I don't
Did you
know. I
like
was
school
always
though?
into school.
Did
Yeah,
you
I
like
was
school
always
or were you just good at it?
well, I was good at it, but I think I also liked it. I don't know. That's an interesting question. I've never like dissected that, but it never felt like, oh God, the pressure, I don't know. It just like it was something I was good at. I'm really good at memorizing things and then forgetting them. So like I took Latin and I'd like do amazing on the test. And then like 2 weeks later, I'd be like, I don't know anything. So my I don't know. School was definitely a priority. I also ran track for many years, starting in 3rd
Wow.
grade. So many summers, though, I was like, God, must we? We did this thing called Fun Run, which was not fun. Um, and I still like to this day, and I had a lot of like endorphin highs from track, right? Like there was a year in like junior year of high school where I was doing amazing. I was running the 400. I was winning. Or we were doing relays, 4x8, 4x4, and winning them all, etc. But like when I see a track now, I like kind of like go like I don't want to be dramatic here, but like a little bit of like comes in because you know unlike many other sports, you're like a single person out there running on track, right? It's all on you. Even if you're in a relay, right, it's still on you. I also played basketball, but yeah, track track is interesting because, right, you're like, I'm at the line, the gun's gonna go off, right? So there's like a number of things that occur that kind of like get your adrenaline going if you look back on it, right? Your the anticipation is there, and then it's like, go, go, go. The year that I actually played basketball in high school, which is hilarious because I don't look like a basketball player, but I was really good in ninth grade. But in 10th grade, I sat on the bench. But the year I had basketball for track, I was in like such great shape that like that was my best track year. Then
Mhm.
like that was actually 10th grade, not 11th grade. So when I came back in 11th grade, not doing basketball, it was like womp womp, and then track became a little less fun because I was just not hitting my times from the year before. Anyway, I'm droning about track.
Were you no, well, I'm curious to know about track because you mentioned like that there's pressure because it was all on you and it's a very individualized
Yeah.
sport, which I totally get. Did you feel the same pressure though with school and getting grades? Because that's also all
Mm,
on you. Like, was there the same pressure
no.
or no? So why in track, but why not in academics?
That's interesting. I don't know. Maybe it just came more naturally in academics. You're also not like standing in front of everyone getting grades,
Right.
right? Your
Right.
grades are coming back to you. Yes, you're held accountable and your parents see it and all of this and that. I mean, I guess, there were like a couple times where it'd be like, "Oh, you could have done better on this test because I know you can do it." Like a little bit of that, but like not really. I don't know. I just um
More performance anxiety with track because it's
I
people
guess
are watching and it's that one moment. That's all you
it's
have. It's
that one
not like
moment,
a
it's all you have. You really want to do well. It goes by so fast and
Mhm.
you're like, "Oh, crap," you know? Um I don't know, like I loved the aftermath, like, in a relay, say I was the first person in a relay and I did it, and then it was, like, so exciting. So I loved it, but I would say, like, the sporting camaraderie of, like, a basketball or something was much less, I felt a lot less pressure doing that, even though I was probably better at track than basketball, so I don't know, it's
Now, did you think when you were doing because obviously if you were a good student, you knew you were probably gonna go off and do post-secondary. Was athletics were you good at track? Like, did you think that maybe you would,
oh, no.
like, run at collegiate level or
Yeah, I mean, I was good, but, like, not that good. Oh, no. There was never talk of that, and I was not, like, doing, like, elite sports during the summer or anything like that, so that was not ever gonna happen.
how did you spend the summers?
How did I spend the summers? I mean, we belonged to the pool,
Oh, okay.
Southwest Swim Club. Yeah, it was like there were 2 pools to belong to that, like, there was, like, the country club and Southwest, and sort of it, like, divided, like, the kinda people. Um So, like, constantly, like, taking swimming lessons every summer, but also just, like, going to the pool with my friends, hanging out, being there. I mean, I feel like that's what we did every summer. I think, like, my memories of that are, like, the maraschino like, fake maraschino cherries that come out of the the vending machine that are, like, so good when you have, like, wet fingers, from the pool. Um, and, I mean, a lot of family vacations, a lot of, like, I can remember, I mean, my kids cannot believe there was a time before GPS, but I mean, I remember driving with my cousins and their family somewhere and getting lost in like Gatlinburg somewhere, and like someone was reading the map and it was like, did we turn, and that kind of thing. So we did a lot of vacations with um my dad's sister's family because they had 5 kids and they surrounded our ages. And so we often were with them camping and doing things, which is interesting because like I do not want to camp now. I did a ton of camping as a kid. And this is partly because of my OCD, but and a lot of trips to Colorado and Florida. I mean, we knew people there, but looking back, I'm like, oh, we went there a lot. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's not like in New York where people are like, "I got a Hamptons house," we didn't, like, have a house, we were, um, I don't know, just like kids hanging out at the mall. I
Mhm,
don't
mhm. And were you, good in school? Were there certain subjects that you like when I'm sure when you get to high school, were there certain subjects you liked more than others, even though you probably were you straight A's across the board, but you kind of gravitated more towards certain subjects? Like, at what point did you kind of fall in love with journalism and that stream of things? Like, where did that come in?
Yeah, I mean, I was straight A's across the board. Again, I think I'm pretty bright, but I also think that's part of like the whole conversation around who's good at standardized tests. Like I said, like I'm really good at standardized tests. I'm really good at memorizing and like being able to do them, and I learn in a traditional way like that. And so I don't want to discount my own, brain, but like, I think that was part of it, especially back then. Um I definitely like I took the ACT to get into college and I scored a perfect score on English. And my science and math scores were like, I mean, they were fine, but like it brought down my overall score. So, um,
A perfect English ACT.
ACT, but not SAT, right? The ACT is easier, I just believe.
Well, it's still not
Um,
not easy.
no, no. So like and it's hilarious that I'm like, perfect score. It's like, I'm in my 40s now. Who cares? Um, But yeah, I mean, so I definitely gravitated more toward like language arts and English and these and this and that. I mean, I remember like in the realm of math, because my dad, while he was a professor of computer and electrical engineering, has a PhD in mathematics. So he like I I had a lot of ability to have an amazing help teacher at home.
Mhm.
Like, when I got into the higher levels of, like, calculus, I mean, like, I don't even know what was going on. Um, the guy who taught calculus at my high school was doctor somebody, but we found out he was a doctor of theology, so I was like, Maybe this is why I'm not learning calculus properly." Yeah, I like algebra a lot better than geometry. I don't see spatially. I'm really bad, like, with, like, geography. Like I'll live somewhere for like 20 years. Someone will be like, "Oh, and then you turn down Elm and you go," and I'll be like, I don't know." Which is funny because I have a 9-year-old son who is like almost a savant in geography. Like he can like look at the map, the world map, and like point it out and draw them. And he knows the flags of every country. And he'll like tell me about the history of what happened with this country and how it became a colony. And so it's really interesting to just see that like some of this is just really innate.
Huh.
Um,
Interesting. Did you feel pressure to follow in your dad's footsteps of being an engineer, math, science ever? Or at what point was it before you
no,
get to high school where you knew, like, you know what, I'm definitely not there. I'm going a different path.
my parents didn't give a lot of the normal pressures that some parents did. There was no pressures around what you're gonna do, or like when are you getting married, when are you having kids. Like they never said
Mhm.
things like that. So it was definitely an expectation, like you're going to college, you know.
Right.
But no, my dad would always say women in engineering. And this is in the in the 90s. He'd be like, women in engineering, like we need them, you can make a lot of money, like there aren't women, like
Yeah.
he would have only so many female students, etc. But it just was never a thing. I never even thought about it, honestly.
So
And I don't think I would be good at it. I'm not that's not so. I got when I really started thinking about like journalism. So I was on the newspaper at my high school. It was called the Purple and Gold because those were our school colors. And I was also on the cross country team. This is senior year. And we had the rattiest uniforms. They were like falling off people's bodies. They were like paper thin. And like every year the football team would come out and like new uniforms would be like da, 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 da. So I like wrote this op-ed about that. And we got new uniforms in 2 weeks. And I was like, "What?" And, my cross country coach kind of was like a little slap on the wrist because I didn't tell him I was writing that, but we got new uniforms, and it was like, "Whoa, hey,
huh, the
influence,
power of
right?"
the
Like I'm
power
like
of
like
story.
something can happen, you know? You can make change. Um
What was the op-ed? What was the like?
Well, it was just basically about, like, the prioritization of I mean, I don't even know, I'm sure it wasn't that
Right.
amazing, to be honest, like, looking back, but it was just the prioritization of, like, how, certain sports and teams just are, like, completely overlooked while others are, constantly getting the money pumped in, etcetera. Um, I don't know what my point was, other
So
than
was that the first moment where you realized the power of storytelling and the influence it could have over, like, was that like, wow, this is a cool thing that
yeah,
I'm
that is,
good
like
at.
That is like a seminal moment when I think back
Yeah.
on that. I'm like, I got us new uniforms by writing about sort of the injustice. I mean, as low as you want to think of it, right? Which it's interesting because my career then divulged into a path that was less about social change until later on.
Huh.
And now what really like galvanizes me um is like the intersection of journalism and social change. So it's
Where
funny
it
when
started.
you look back at that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where it started. Your first,
Never really thought about
kind
it
of
before, but yeah,
passion for journalism. Yeah, was, writing something and seeing the power of story and how it can invoke change. And
yeah,
in
absolutely.
and this was a small case, but it also like probably set you on the path to where you are now, unknowingly, like kind of
Yeah, I
got.
mean, I don't even like I didn't even really like think I never really thought I was like gonna go into journalism until I applied to a bunch of schools, Northwestern, Notre Dame, et cetera, got into them, and then ended up just staying in my hometown and going to the University of Missouri. Um, like Notre Dame doesn't have a journalism school, so like what?
Hmm.
I don't know what I was,
So
you
why
know,
would you? What was your like? What
I
did you
think Notre Dame
apply?
was always on my radar because I grew up Catholic. I went to Catholic school for 9 years before high school, and Notre Dame being just, a well-known name, and I just don't think I don't think I really, like, knew what I was gonna do then. So Northwestern, yeah, so that's Northwestern, Columbia, and Missouri are, the 3 journalism schools that are regularly ranked in the top 3, so that makes sense, but, um,
And did you get into all three of those schools when you applied?
I did. I didn't apply to the Northwestern Journalism School, though. I had
Okay.
just applied to Northwestern and then was like, "Then I'll transfer in."
Mm.
I don't know. I also applied to like, why did I do this? I applied to Rice. I was put on the wait list. Rice, I don't even know anything about that. I did an entire application for Trinity and then didn't send it. Also Trinity, what? Like, I don't know. I just look back, I'm like, "This is so odd."
So why did you choose University of Missouri? So you
I
got
mean,
you got accepted to, was it 3 or 4 schools that you had to choose from? And what was
yeah,
your criteria and why did you end up choosing? Was it journalism or was it because it was close to home? Like what was
it
the
was
decision?
I mean, I got a basically like a full scholarship to the University of
Oh.
Missouri through various things. A, because of being in state, B, because of certain grades, et cetera, and whatever. So, um, but B, I really stayed because of a boyfriend, which is
Mm.
pathetic. Like I look back and I'm like, what? It all worked out in the end. We
But
broke up.
it
Well, we
set you on
totally
this
broke up.
path.
Like,
Yeah.
but, like, also, like, my good friends were going there. I was gonna be rooming with one of them, and I don't know. I just, in the end, it was probably the right decision because the journalism school there has so much going on, and it was right there, and I don't have student debt, you know?
Mm.
Northwestern's a lot more expensive.
Right.
Uh, so, yeah.
So you get to Missouri with your friends, with your boyfriend at the time, and what was that experience like moving away from home on your own for the first time in journalism school, passion you like? Did you maintain good grades? Did you kind of find a little bit of enjoyment in having the freedom and maybe grades slip? Like what was that transition like from, kind of
I mean, look,
high school to.
my parents live, like, 7 minutes away from my dorm,
Okay.
like, so
Okay.
it's not like I was like, "Oh, I'm out," you know? I mean, so but I 100% eventually I joined a sorority, which I don't talk a lot about in the Northeast because it's like people are like and look, there's like a lot of weird things about that, but like I also made a lot of good friends. I mean, whatever. It's a big community and you gravitate toward your people.
Yeah.
But I often won the beer and books award because that was something our that they would give a, an
What's the
award. They
Beer
would
and Books Award? I need to know more about
yeah,
what's
the
the
beer and
Beer and
books
Books
award would
Award?
be like, you got whatever it is grades, but like you're also out partying. Like, I mean, I definitely did a lot of like parties and toga parties, and we did what were called serenades, and like I was like a person who would perform. Like I would like write skits and then like we would perform them. Like one year, like I dressed up like Madonna from Vogue and like had the comb boob outfit and like we went in front of the fraternity and we did a whole thing. It was like you were asking them to be your partner for some, college event or something like that. So I was always that person, and I like did skits like when you're doing sorority rush, right? The girls come in. I mean, the whole thing seems a little gross, but like whatever. You're doing it. Like I made these gigantic clue cards over the summer. I like drew the
Huh.
clue, I mean, like 6 of them, and we did like life-sized a clue skit, and I wrote the skit, and I like did this whole thing. So I've always been a bit of a performer or a wannabe performer. Like I was in choir in high school and I loved it. Like honestly, like here's the thing. If I had like an amazing voice, that would have been, I would have like gone that way. Like if I could
Huh.
like be on Broadway, that'd be like my dream. Like I'm
Hmm.
obsessed. Um I have I have a fine voice. Like I'm an alto, I can carry a tune. I'm like gonna be in the chorus. I'm not gonna like, be like the star. However, in college, 1 year, because all the sororities and fraternities would pair up and do these skits and whatever. Kappa Kappa Gamma and Sigma Nu won first place with our spoof of Dick Tracy, and I played the Madonna character. So I do feel vindicated a little bit.
Did you ever think that you'd be able to combine your, I guess, skill or profession in writing with performance aspect? Like, did you ever think maybe you would get into writing scripts or writing, movies or books or things of that nature? Like, did that ever cross your mind in terms of like combining both of those passions?
I mean, I was also like obsessed with Days of Our Lives.
Mhm.
For many years, my mom, my sister, and I would all be watching it, and like we'd still be texting. I finally, probably like 8 years ago, I gave up because I couldn't keep up. Um, but still, when I go home and my mom's watching it, I'm like, oh my God, Marlena's still here. Oh my God, what's going on? Anyway, and I was like, I would love to write scripts for Days of Our Lives, which is hilarious because what does that have to do with social justice? But like, um, and of course now it's like I feel like everybody's like, I want to write a script, so I don't want to be that
Mm.
person. But like, I think what I didn't realize, because like podcasts didn't exist back then, et cetera, like I don't really know, like, oh, like there's an aspect of being an editor, especially an editor in chief, and being in front of people and doing presentations and this and that. So I think part of the ability to be a good executive editorially and marketing is you have to present to people, and you
Mhm.
are, I don't want to say you're acting, but like
It's a
you are,
performance.
right, you are performing in some way or another. And I've done a lot of national TV, and so I guess that plays in. I don't know. I never really thought about it. Um, I've always liked it. And I like to be,
You know what's interesting is you like that, but when we go back to your track and field days, it brought you a lot of anxiety to perform, but you actually found that you thrived
It's
in the
something about
arts
the
and not in
track. It's
sports.
something about the track, and actually, I forgot to say, in ninth grade, I won first place in pantomime, at an ar at a competition. I was always, so like, I'm actually forgetting, I used to do this thing called creative place growing up that my mom made me do, and I was like, "I don't wanna do it," and now I'm like, look back, I loved it so much. It was like
Huh.
puppetry and all this stuff, and like, it's like it was like an extracurricular activity, and then I was always in choir, and I was always in, right, I was, like, doing skits and stuff. So,
Yeah.
yeah, ninth grade, I did a skit, and it was called Wheel of Misfortune, where everything went wrong. I was Vanna. I picked pantomime. Like, you had to, like, pick, like, I didn't pick it. I, like, drew that out of a hat, and I was like, "Oh my god, are you kidding me?" Anyway, I
But
won.
no performance
That
anxiety when it
didn't give
came to
me
the arts.
anxiety. No,
Interesting.
so there's something about track. I don't even know if it's, like, I always think it's like, "Oh, it's just on you," but, like, hello, pantomime, single pantomime, that's just on you. I don't know if it's because of, like, the setting, like the
Mhm.
gun, the spikes on your shoes, like, the gravel, there's just something about it that gives me agita, because I don't really have a lot of performance anxiety about doing things. Now, I will say, anytime I go on national TV, I freak out for, like, the 5 minutes before I get on it, and as soon as it starts, I'm, like, totally fine.
You're good. Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
but I don't know. I mean, maybe it's because of the like, you don't really know how the performance is going to turn out in track, even though why would that be different? Whereas, like, when you're practicing both, I don't know. I don't have a theory.
Do you still run now, or is it like
No,
you don't, eh? No.
no, no. I don't like find it enjoyable, and I didn't find it
Mm.
enjoyable then either. I found the like team camaraderie and the like I always loved relays. I don't it was like and winning. I liked winning, you know? Um I my exercise has gone a little off the rails here, but like pre-pandemic, I was actually doing American karate at a martial arts place like in my town of Westchester, where turns out the Kyosa had like trained with Superfoot Bill Wallace. If you know anything about like kickboxing,
That
he's like a famous, he's like super famous. So I am a what am I? What did I get to? Purple belt. I was doing it with my son who's now 13. I'm a green belt. He's a purple belt, but it shut down during the pandemic. And so since then I haven't been doing it, but I loved it. I loved it. Um and there's definitely anxiety. There's definitely like you to get to a new belt level, you have to perform basically against someone else. Like they'll do like 3 rounds. And I remember getting up against this guy who we were like the same belt level, but he was like 80 times stronger than me. And just like, and so like just like out like the 2 minute round, just like dying, like no breath. But it was a really interesting place because unlike say if you go to like a boot camp in the city and it's all like, you know, women, they all look the same and they're all wearing their Lululemons or whatever. This was like a motley crew. It was like a 70-year-old dude the Kyoso went to college with. Then it would be like some teenagers like who were like amazing. And then it'd be like, oh, you know, some middle-aged people. It was like people you would never really be around. And it was an interesting thing because it was all generations. And
mhm.
I actually wrote an editor's letter about this for Women's Health when I was still there. It was my last editor's letter. You're not really around other generations like that except in family. And so I feel like it was such an interesting thing because you had teenagers and 70-year-olds bonding over things.
Mm.
And then it'd be like there'd be music playing and like sometimes it'd be like Billie Eilish and then sometimes it'd be Zeppelin, you know, depending on who got to choose. Um
It's really
and
cool.
so it was really cool. I still bemoan that that is gone and I need to I want to find something like that again because it was also, I mean, it's really mental as well as physical because a
Mhm.
lot of it is like fortitude and um building your confidence to like, you know, and doing these combinations. Like, I mean, it's also just fun to like do a combination with 20 moves and
Mhm,
like,
mhm.
you know, you're like, "Oh my god," it's like so um,
That's really cool. That's and it's interesting to understand kind of how you got there in terms of like with regards to athletics and martial arts is like where athletics meets the art form, which but it's cool to hear the evolution of where you found your spot there.
yeah.
Now back to college
Oh my god.
when you
My cat's
oh,
coming.
that's amazing. This is perfect. How many
It's
cats do you
Tommy.
have?
This is Tommy. He's one of 2 cats. Oh my god, move along, buddy.
It's a
Um,
start. He's there.
yeah.
So when you're getting close to graduating, did you know what you wanted to do? Or at that time when you were in your junior, senior year, what did you think you were going to do? And then how did that process go when you started interviewing for actual jobs?
So I had a degree in magazine journalism. Magazines barely exist anymore. Um, I for the year after college, I stayed in my hometown and worked at the local newspaper. There were 2 local newspapers. One of them is run by the students, the journalism students, so I had already worked at that during J school, and then the other one, I worked there as a copy editor. I remember taking an edit test to get the job, and it was like, "Who are the Supreme Court justices?" And I was like, "Clarence Thomas." I couldn't answer any of them, but I was an amazing copy editor. I have an eagle eye for detail, which would be pointed out even in later years as it became editor in chief. It's like I couldn't stop, and like the copy team would be like, "Mike, what? How do you? What's going on?" It's just an innate skill.
Hmm.
Um, so I was a copy editor there, and then I worked at this the Missouri State Teachers Association magazine. So just like doing, you know, it was a trade publication for teachers. And then I found out two friends of mine were moving to New York, and I was like, "Can I come?" Um,
No job. You're
no
just going to
job.
New
None of
York
us had
and you're gonna
jobs.
figure it out.
None of us had jobs. We all like I kind of tried to apply to some, and this is in the late '90s, but everybody be like, apply when you get here. Like it wasn't like today. There wasn't remote
Right.
work. It was like there's 80 people trying to bust into magazines who live down the street. Like you're not getting anywhere. So I moved to New York, no job, no apartment. We stayed with a friend of ours who had also been in the J school in Missouri, who worked at Women's Day at the time. I did have a friend whose uncle was like an executive at Hearst. And so I think that's how I got my first interview at Redbook, which I got the job. So my first job, so it was like I got a job within like a couple weeks.
Oh, wow.
Like that doesn't happen now. Hi. Um, as a
Were
copy
you
editor,
good were you good at interviewing? Like, when you got the interview, did your performance anxiety come in? Or when you got in that interview stage, were you calm and you felt comfortable? Or, like, what was your state of mind getting into an interview, especially at that time?
I don't honestly remember, but I don't
No?
remember being like freaking out about it or anything. Um, I had a Benetton suit. I do remember my Benetton suit. Um, tan with like this green plaid shirt. Anyway, I think I also got the job because fewer people wanted to be copy editors. To get an editorial assistant job was much more competitive. I
Mm.
had a background in copy editing, etc. So I went for that job, which also did pay more um, than an editorial
Why
assistant.
was the other one why was that not as in demand? Copy editors.
Fewer. It's more of a technical job where it's like you're checking for grammar and style and et cetera. You're not really the writer, editor creatively.
Gotcha,
So it's
gotcha.
not like what I wanted to do in the long term, but I was like, okay, I got this job. I got a job at Redbook. Oh my God. I just moved to New York. And so eventually, like, that's not what I wanted to do. I like it's an amazing skill and it's like sort of becoming a lost art as
Mm.
journalism teams slim down. What do they cut? They cut copy editors, they cut fact checkers, they yeah. And but I always wanted to move into the more editorial side of things. So I eventually got a job as the assistant beauty editor at Redbook. The previous one left, and the beauty director at the time was like, "Well, I like the comments you made on all the proofs." Like when they were circulating, and I'd be like, "Well, this doesn't make sense because of this, or what if we did this with like as a copy editor."
Right.
Um, I think she was also forced to hire someone on the staff. I'm looking back, to be honest, but that's how I got into beauty. I kind of fell into it. I didn't know what a beauty editor was. It's not like today where like beauty editors or influencers on Instagram and everybody knows and blah blah blah. Like I didn't know this existed. I knew fashion editors existed, but like actually that makes a lot less sense for me. I'm not like a stylist and if you're fashion and beauty, I mean, there are some amazing fashion journalists, but beauty editors tend to be more writers, editors than generally fashion editors. So, yeah, I kind of fell into beauty and then
Hmm.
spent my next decade doing that.
10 years. Did you
Yeah.
think when you got that job, like, that would be a stepping stone just because now you're in editorial that you would go and do something else? Like, what was your thought process of taking that? Like, 'cause you probably weren't in
Um,
love with beauty, but you were in love with the being an editor and that field.
Well, I mean, I always liked style and fashion. I don't think I like knew like beauty editing was a thing. So it's like
Right.
it quickly became an area that I was like, I love this.
Huh.
And there's interesting with beauty is like there's also a really sciencey side of it. Like you're interviewing journalists, cosmetic chemists, if you're that type of beauty editor, right? Which I am.
Mm.
I mean, when I got to Allure, I became sort of the amateur dermatologist. I was the one who'd be like reading through like skincare journal studies and being like, wait, oh my God, okay, so the delivery system of that thing is at 10%, and that
Huh.
means it'll do this, and like interviewing derms and chemists. And I love that. I like totally nerd out on that stuff. Um, because it's super detailed. So like I happen to be like really detailed, but also like I always wanted to be an editor in chief. Always. I don't know why. I like at the time I couldn't have told you why. I was just
Huh.
like, I'm gonna be an editor in chief, and people would be like, sure.
At what point? Like when you
early,
first
like
started
hot,
working at a school or like when you got to New York?
like when I got
Really?
to New York and I saw like what was going on, like how magazines were run.
Huh.
Um,
Was there
you know,
somebody
like
that you saw as the editor in chief where you were like, "That?" Like, was there a model for you to say, like, "This is why I wanna do that because this individual, I wanna be like them," or was it just
no,
like, where did
I
that
think
come
it
from?
was
Like
more like I want to run this. I mean, that
mm,
sounds bad. I think looking back now, I can say, well, I have a vision and I want to carry that out and I want to do this and make change and try this and take risks and blah 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 and like um I don't think I could have articulated that at the time. I don't know if I really knew, but I was like I loved beauty and I was like this is amazing. I'm going to be in beauty for as long as I can and um I worked at Good Housekeeping with the Good Housekeeping seal of approval, where we were literally testing like frizz fighters in the humidity chamber. And that started the sciencey part of it started getting
huh.
in because we had chemists on staff. And we were really testing things you know in with machine learnings right um but I always wanted to be a beauty editor like a more fashion magazine so I eventually got my job at Allure. I worked at Allure twice. I became the beauty director of Allure and in the beauty world at least at that time that's sort of like Allure is was the only beauty magazine so it was like a big job. It was a great job. We had 50 pages of beauty in every issue, and it was like, okay, well, we can't contradict ourselves or repeat ourselves within 50 pages. And then when I get to the next issue, I got to make sure I didn't contradict or repeat myself. Like, how much can one say about
Hmm.
mascara? Well, I'll tell you, I wrote an 8-page story about it. So, it was like a really interesting exercise in like taking the same topic and figuring out 80 different ways to talk about it and come at it and da da da. And like the beauty of Allure. The thing about Allure our editor in chief, Linda Wells, who was the founding editor, had come from the New York Times and she was a reporter and like she was serious. And like the whole thing was, we're going to write about beauty like how the New York Times would. Like, we're not just going to be like, this
Hmm.
is pretty. It's going to be like, we're going to look at the ingredients. We're going to go beyond the press release. We're going to interview the experts. Like, none of this used to be done, right? The fact that like people interview experts and dermatologists and chemists and hairstylists and look at clinical studies and actually reporting backstage from the fashion shows on what the beauty trends are. Like, Allure and Linda started all that. Like, that didn't
Huh.
exist. And
So how
she
did you get the job? How did you get the job at Allure? Like, did somebody reach out to you? Did you apply? Like, how did
no, I mean,
that
I thought I would be like, and this sounds terrible because women's service magazines, which are like what Good Housekeeping's, Red Books, et cetera, of the world, it was really hard at the time to transition from that into like a more fashion magazine. Like when I worked at
okay.
Red Book, I actually applied for a beauty job at Vogue and was told without an interview or anything like, it's too different. And I'm like, well, I'm writing in
Really?
the style of Red Book because I worked there. Which is much more understood right now. And now it's more like you look for people who are really talented. It was really hard at the time. So anyway, I found out Allure had a job. I wrote to the beauty director at the time, who now is one of my really good friends. We've known each other now for like what 15 years. Um, and she didn't know me from like Bump, whatever, but like was like, oh, reach out to Conde HR, super nice, whatever. So I was like, Kristen Parada suggested I reach out. And so like they were like, okay. And actually HR at the time was like, well, Allure doesn't like anyone. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll give it a go. So I did the test. And they liked it. And I met with them and I got the job.
Huh. Do you
And
remember who
I
you
didn't
interviewed
know
with?
what yeah, I interviewed with 3 people, and then I interviewed with Linda. I interviewed with Kristen Parada, who was the beauty director. I interviewed with the managing editor and the executive editor. So I came in, it was like me and the 3 of them sitting there.
Huh. That must have been
Um,
stressful.
that was stressful, but, it I remember writing a lead, a lead's like the first couple sentences. So for that test, um, to get a job in publishing, you have to do what are called edit tests. So some of them are very involved. Like I've done edit tests that are 20 pages long. But Allure was like, we just do like 2 things because we'll see if you're good. Um, And I remember writing a deck about like Screech from Saved by the Bell and tied it in with acne and whatever and like a whole thing. So they like that. And Allure was interesting because we always Linda always wanted, who was the editor, always wanted to tie it back to what was going on in pop culture. And that was
Right.
like, so it'd be like there was once this line of beauty products created by nuns in the middle of somewhere. So I literally was like calling the Harvard Divinity School for like quotes to be like, wait, how can I get this in? Like, I'm calling from Allure. Um, so, but I mean that it was an amazing. It was an incredibly hard place to work because the
Mhm.
standards were incredibly high. But I became like an editing machine, um, like so many who have worked at Allure, because it was like it went through rounds and rounds of editors, and at that time, like, the structure of a magazine would be, like, 5 people would read it on top of you, you know? And at the time, this was on paper, so you'd be, like, reading people's conversations going down, like, you'd submit a
Jeez.
manuscript, and it'd be like, "I'm this and that," but so, like, we got used to revising, tightening, like, every word matters, like, don't use that passive
Mm.
word, don't say that in 5 words when it can say it in this. And I do think that's a bit of that, like where people were like, look at print journalists and be like, "Ah, dinosaurs." It's like, no, 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 nobody knows how to edit like a print
Yeah.
journal
Huh.
because when you only have 150 words, and in that 150 words, you've got to get in a clever lead, quotes, something about the product or the thing going on, details, etc. End it with a cute thing. It's like that's not easy.
Yeah.
Um, or if you're doing a long piece and you have to contain it and you need sidebars and it's like all of this stuff about right, you package things, you like send around outlines and you'd be like, okay, it's an 8-page story on mascara, but it's going to start out with a reported intro about blah blah blah, what's going on in the mascara market, XYZ. Then it's going to have the sidebar about like which ones for your lashes. Then it's going to have the sidebar about like, oh, so and so did this in a movie, let's interview how they did the lashes, etc. And it's funny because I've seen like some postings now on LinkedIn for taxonomy editors, and I'm like, does that just mean how you format a story? Like, there's a lot of very like specific jobs now that like a magazine editor just naturally did.
Did.
And
Huh.
it's interesting having then gone and worked in corporate America and having talked to a lot of my former colleagues working in corporate America at other companies. People aren't used to making quick decisions like you did in magazines because you'd be like, I got to make that decision. Okay. Is that going to go on the cover? Who am I putting on the cover? I'm deciding. And if it doesn't sell,
Right.
you got to that point where like you made a lot of decisions all the time and you didn't consult 80 people. You had a core team, you did it. You also like you were responsible for the product. The product was the magazine and the digital site and the social media. You were responsible for the cover lines, the marketing of it, the big initiatives. You did the press, you went on TV, you did all of this. You formatted,
Hmm.
like you did SEO. Um so I think there's going to be a reckoning where people realize that like people who came from editorial, and there's some talk about it, right? That like their skills really transfer over because it's not like people think, oh, you just write sentences or you take a manuscript and you put it in the magazine. You'd be like, oh, please, Lord. Yeah. You get it in, you got to reshape it. You ask 80 questions. It goes back and forth, back and forth. Then you got to get it in the voice of the magazine. Then you got to cut it. You got to shape it. Does it have this? We need a sidebar about that. Oh, wait, now there's another story in the magazine about that. I got to make sure like the lineup is such, it goes in a flow.
Hmm.
Um, and so it's interesting. I mean, I also have seen people who haven't pivoted to digital, and you definitely have to pivot and like learn SEO and like do all this
Right.
stuff. But generally the skills of being a senior level editor, um, and then as being an editor in chief, you're also basically like chief marketer, like you are
Right.
the face, you are the brand. It's more like you're like a chief brand officer, right? Um,
So did you understand? I mean, when you get the role at Allure and you see that it's run the way it is by Linda, the editor in chief, was that really eye opening for you because you wanted to be an editor in chief and now you're in this environment that is maintains a very high standards and very mature in how they're doing it. Did that make it more exciting for you to want to be editor in chief after you were exposed to that, or did that scare you and say like, wow,
no,
this is actually a lot
um,
more than I thought?
I was never scared of it. But I also worked with like another legendary editor in chief, Ellen Levine, who was the editor in chief of Good Housekeeping. for a long time and became the editorial director at Hearst. So it's not like I hadn't been exposed. They were very different. They were very
Right.
different kinds of editors. But you pick up things from each editor that you work with. And I think, I mean, Allure is interesting because in the beauty industry, it had so much influence and so much impact, and everyone was desperado to be in Allure. And
Hmm.
the Allure Best of Beauty Awards, which I ran for 5 years as the beauty director there, have an incredible influence over people's purchasing, right? Like there are
Right.
studies that show, and I can't quote them exactly, but it's like if you're a point of purchase and you see a black eyeliner and one has the Allure seal of approval and one doesn't, you buy the one with the seal. And so in some ways, even though, and Linda was also a champion of like tying, psychology and anthropology in with beauty, right? It was never
Mm-hmm.
just like, oh, this color. It was always deeper. And so in some ways, even though I feel like my sort of like social justice and cause-based journalism came out later at Women's Health, some of that, existed at
Hmm.
Allure because it was about more than, and look, we can look back at any of these magazines and be like, why do we say that? And why do we, oh my God, how embarrassing. Who cares about like if you look like this or that? Um, but there were like a lot of things that were really educational and inspirational and celebrating people who did things from the past. I mean, I remember we did this story once on the runways. There were all these big French twists and bouffants and whatever. And I was like, oh, let's do a story called Hitchcock Hair. Because it was reminded me, they all reminded me of like all those like Tippi Hedren and the Birds and all these things. And so our creative director, Paul Cavaco, who's famous and like did Madonna's sex book, went off and did this amazing shoot. And it's like these women in kitchens with like amazing like dresses and Hitchcock hair. And we actually found the hairstylist who did have Tippi Hedren's hair and interviewed her, and she was like in her 90s. And so it'd be like we like it was like even talking about it, I get a little bit of chills because it was like
Yeah.
we would like go, we would, it wasn't just like 3 tips to the hair, it was like
Yeah. There was levels, there was depth, there was
levels. It was like the
complexity.
world. How did
Yeah.
this come to be? These artists did this thing. This represents something. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think also,
Cool.
when you see that come together, when you're like, I had that idea, and then here it is in this like amazing photo shoot with these like top
Yeah.
photographers. It's like such a beautiful thing. And then when you see people
Mm-hmm.
reading it, you're like, oh my God. I mean, that is like one of the things you miss most. Like I'd be like on the train going to work at Women's Health, and I see someone reading Women's Health, and I'd be like, I had it.
That's really cool.
And
That's
so,
really cool.
it's pretty cool.
So at Allure, you're there. What was after that? And how did that happen? Where did you get your next, I don't want to say big break, but like,
Yeah.
and was it hard to leave Allure, like when you decided that you wanted to move on? Like, what was that process like?
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing in magazines at the time was like someone had to leave above you basically for you to like get a promotion, which is why like a lot of the people resumes from that time look like a lot of jumping every year and a half or 2 years or whatever, because it's not like you would just get elevated to a level. Like if you're the associate beauty editor, the beauty editor has to quit, and then the senior beauty editor has
Right.
to quit, and then the and like, so that's why people jumped around a lot. I did work at Allure for 5 years because in beauty, like that was my dream job. Like I got that dream job. And I will always be thankful to Linda for hiring me the first time from Good Housekeeping when other brands were like, well, it's Good Housekeeping. And it's like, well, what you don't get is actually Good Housekeeping, the science of Good Housekeeping. And the service that Good Housekeeping provides can translate over here. And Linda saw that. And I will always appreciate her for hiring people based on talent, which she did.
Did that influence your leadership style when you were looking at hiring
I
based on that
100% will
experience?
hire based on talent, and it's interesting because you do go, "Oh, ooh, should I hire from, like, this fancy place and this and that?" And then you get the edit tests, and then you really see. And
Mm.
sometimes it's the people who work at, quote, unquote, these whatever, and sometimes it's people working in places you would have never been like, "Well, this translates to this." the edit test is the proof, because when people just provide their clips, they've been edited, they've been rewritten, they've been done by all the magazine editors. So you really have to give them this edit test to see. And so it's all about the edit test to me. Like, can you do the job? Can you think creatively? Can you edit? Can you, what are you going to bring? And so, yeah, I think so, after like I said, I wanted to be an editor in chief. In earlier magazine days, a few beauty directors had gone on to jump the level from beauty director to editor in chief. This is when teen magazines were around a lot. So like the beauty director of Glamour, Leslie Jane Seymour, became the editor in chief of YM. Later, she went on to be the editor in chief of Marie Claire and more, etc. I also worked for Leslie at Redbook. When you asked about like, how did I watch anyone's trajectory? I did watch Leslie's trajectory because she did that. Amy Astley, who was the beauty director of Teen Vogue, the beauty director of Vogue, became the editor of Teen Vogue, and then later the editor of Art Digest, etc. So beauty editors were an interesting case to be editor in chief because they understood not just the editorial side, but the business side, because a lot of beauty is a big business. And so as a beauty editor, you also were often doing sales calls with your publishing side. You were on the editorial side, but you also got the fact that like we have to make revenue and we have advertising. And so an editor in chief has to bring together both sides of that, understanding the editorial, but also understanding the business. And so that's why I think beauty editors often end up kind of in that realm. So I wanted to move on, but it was kind of like facing the same thing from like going from like a service magazine to a more fashiony magazine. It was like, well, you're a beauty director. Well, what? I don't know if you can edit all this other stuff we have in the magazine. And so I'd apply for executive editor jobs. That's like sort of the number 2. And I applied for some and like had some interviews, but like it just wasn't panning out, et cetera. And then eventually I got recommended by 2 people who worked at Women's Health for an executive editor position, and did, a 15-page edit test, in which I remember crying at my apartment, being like, I don't know how to edit this health story. Like because I had only edited beauty, but I mean, my belief is, and this, so I'm of 2 minds, right? Like I would never hire a beauty editor who hadn't been a beauty editor before, because there's so many nuances to it that when somebody comes in from off the street, they're like, oh, this. And you're like, that's been reported on 200 times. That product came. So you do need a certain expertise in that. But I also believe that amazing editors can be amazing editors and span that skill across things. And so I was looking for someone to give me that chance, right? And so I remember having like, I can't edit this, so I'm gonna, and then it came together. Edited the thing. I did my whole thing. I did it. I got the job. I became executive editor of Women's Health. And a few years later, my boss, the editor in chief, left to go to Yahoo when Yahoo was hiring up a bunch of editors in chiefs to run verticals. So she went to run health vertical when I think Marissa Mayer was there. And so I became interim editor in chief and then had to apply for the job. So I got the job. It was really exciting. It took me a while. I think it's interesting in editor in chief life. I mean, I feel like it was like I was just like hitting the stride, right? Because you're like all of a sudden, right? There's definitely a curve, even though like you were involved with a lot of things. All of a sudden, you're the responsible one, and you're choosing the cover slate. You, and the final decision is you, and what picture am I choosing, and I'm with this and that, and like, oh, what are we gonna revamp this, and we're gonna do this. When I applied, I don't really think I thought I was going to change that much, and then I got in the job and I was like, yeah, I am. It was like a time of like like Trump getting elected, and politics and health were like overlapping in a way that was like so dramatic, and culture was going on, and it was like when like these terrible stats were coming around about maternity leave, like how like the US was like worse than the Congo in terms of like having paid federal maternity leave. And so my big first story, like venturing sort of into like social change, was we did this story called Motherfucker. And it was basically about the dismal state of maternity leave for women, and with stats like, 25% of women have to go back to work after 11 days. And I was sitting on a donut after 11 days with my child in the NICU. And so I used my personal story, on my editor's letter, and we used it as a social post to start a
Huh.
campaign called Paid Leave Pays. We partnered with change.org. So we started like doing these things where we're like, let's find a partner org, let's do this. We did a petition where we basically were asking presidential candidates to divulge their position on paid, at the time, maternity leave. Now it's
Mhm.
paternity, parental leave, right? Um, and, we were like doing these tweets, we were sending letters. Our petition was in the top 1% of all change.org petitions. I was like, this is, and then the post where I was like, paid leave pays, and told my personal story became our most liked post on Instagram at the time. And it was like,
Hmm.
we're better than celebrity. I was like, oh, people care. This is interesting. And so that was like what, October 2015. And then from there, the next big thing, we did two other big things. We did, I wrote Dear John
Before
letters.
before you get into that, I have two questions. First, you get your editor in chief job finally,
Yeah.
right? Like you get there. Tell me about the moment of when that sunk in to you've made it. Like you wanted this thing from when you showed up to New York with no job and you got it. When did it sink in and how did that feel? Like were you proud of yourself? What was that moment like? Cuz like you've been working for this thing, this target your entire career and you get it.
I
How did that
know.
feel?
I don't think I'm really good at like taking the moments to be like, it's been 20 years in the making. I don't remember being like, I mean, I remember coming home, and I remember getting the call and being like, yeah, the next edit our limit, and I remember being in WWD, which is like the big trade publication, and I was like, oh my God, and like posting it and whatever. And I remember coming home, and I'm divorced now, but friendly, and came home, my husband, we busted out, champagne glasses. Our neighbors came over, and we were excited, but I don't remember being like, I did it. Like
Mm.
I don't know. I think only in retrospect, I look back and I'm like, I ran a global brand.
Yeah. Like
And
I'm hearing your story for the first time and like I got a rush of emotion like I was watching a movie that the main like and it's just like it's so cool to see like that moment. And even as you're saying, you kind of like you said it and then you got into all the work and I was like, "Hold on. Like this is like this is a
I
big part of the story.
yeah.
Like you've been working for this thing and you get it and it was like I don't know, that's like most people work their entire careers reaching for something and they never actually get to touch it, but the reaching for it is rewarding in itself and you got there, like you got there and
Well,
that's
it's
so
interesting.
cool.
Well, thank you. And I think like as a person who now runs a mental health brand, I should probably reflect on that a little bit more, because celebrating those moments are important, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I now I look back and I can be like, I said at like age 23, I'm gonna be an editor in chief, and people were laughing. Like, I also remember a good friend of mine being like, "Well, you're not gonna be hired as an executive editor because you're a beauty editor, you're not a generalist." I won't ever forget that. And I was like, "Yes, I will." I have an incredible ability. I will like my perseverance and my drive is I had a lot of rejections in the day, especially when I was younger, trying to get out of copy editing and get into general editing and etc. And I remember, but like I will take. I have a weird thing. It'll be like a failure will happen, and I'll be like, really, but then like an hour later, I'm like, no, no, no. And that happened at Women's Health actually. One time we had two cover stars booked for on an issue, and they were booked. Like it was set in stone. We were doing it, whatever. I find out like this doesn't happen. People don't do this. All of a sudden now, whoops, they're going to be on Cosmo. They backed out, and I'm like, what? This I have no. And I was so pissed and like upset and like crying and whatever to myself. And then I was like, oh no, no, no. You know what I'm going to do? I'm gonna do a 5 blowout cover with like 5 influencers, and I'm gonna do 5 separate covers, and then I'm gonna do the cover, and I'm gonna do a thing no one's ever done, and I did it. So, and one boss had said this about me. He was like, "It's interesting, like you'll really get down, and you'll be like complaining and whining and bitching, and then but like you'll come back stronger. And so I do know that about myself. I'm trying to like stop the lows from because I always know it's going to spike back up, but
Yeah.
I have a bit of a depressive streak, like for real. So I'll be like, ah, no, it's never good. And then it's like, okay, no, get back in there.
What do you think the 23-year-old version of yourself would say to the editor in chief of Women's Health magazine when you got that call? What do you think she would say?
I don't know. What? Like, I mean, it's like I'm not like I, I think she'd be like, you like, okay, we did it. I feel like I was like, I'm
Mhm.
gonna do it. And so it's not like, is that weird? Like maybe I'm just like real cocky or something. I don't
No.
know. I had confidence that I was gonna get there, even though a lot of people do not become editor in chief. A lot of people don't want to be editor in chief. They want to remain more as like they don't want to deal with the business part of that. So there's a lot of people who are very qualified to do it who aren't interested. But
Hmm.
then like there's only so many magazines and the job only comes up every once in a while. So if I look at it logically, I'm like, I'm in a small pool of people. Um,
Mhm.
but I think I was just like, well, it's going to happen. So I don't know if that's why when it happened, I was like, okay, it happened.
Mhm.
I don't know. Is that gross?
No, no, it's not. It's not. It's real. It's real. And I think it's not a fake confidence. It's a you wanted something, you did it, and you got it done. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. And I think the other thing I want to point out that's really cool is your first journalist piece was about getting uniforms and evicting change in an
Yeah.
injustice there. Fast forward to your first major piece at Women's Health was also about social change and using that to influence. So, like, that's a cool moment. Do you think when you did that story at Women's Health, was that the seed that you mental your new venture was kind of like this is now happening? Like, I see the power of using this to influence some change, and I like this, and I want to keep doing this.
I mean, yes, I think so because those are the stories that galvanize me the most when we're like, and I'm like, how can a story become a movement? Like,
Mm,
how can and the first time we really did that so, we did this big the maternity leave thing, but when we really blew it out, so then I did another thing where this is like body positivity was starting to become popular in the mainstream. And please, this had been existing in like fat studies in the 70s. It was not a new thing, but like it was taken decades for the mainstream media to catch on. Women's Health is a magazine that put people on in their bikinis and showed their bodies and did this. And it was meant to be celebratory, but it's a certain standard and you can see how that can affect people and particularly now. And we used a lot of cover lines that were not intended to shame, but would be like bikini body in, a month or like drop 2 sizes. Well, first of all, it's not healthy to drop 2 sizes in a month. So we should not have that on the cover. So we did this survey that was like, what don't you like about us? And we included a bunch of cover lines um, and asked people. And the one that won was bikini body. So I wrote these Dear John letters, like we formatted them. I was like, Dear Bikini Body, goodbye. Like, see ya. Wouldn't want to be ya. And we published them in like January of 2016. And it like I didn't even like think that much about it. I was like, I believe this is what's happening. Like I see the zeitgeist. I mean, what I believe is one of my good skills is like seeing things like right about before they're going to happen and
mm,
like really doing them. I'm not scared of taking calculated risk. I call it calculated risk because I don't just do a thing. It's like I check the zeitgeist. I see what's going on. What's bubbling up on social? What's this? Okay, then let's do a quick poll. Let's make sure I'm validating it. Or now you can use data. It's really easy to validate. Um, and and I don't wanna do the same thing everyone else is doing. Like, I wanna take the risk and move forward, and so we did that survey. It basically validated what we thought, did the thing, published it. It blew up. Like, I mean, if things weren't going viral then because it was, before that happened, but, like, it was everywhere. It was like everyone wrote a story about it, like and some people Refinery 29 was like, "Welcome to the party, Women's Health," but I was like, "Okay, well, I still have to sell on newsstand too," So, like, if you look at the business implications, like there was fear in the company, like, oh, what if we do this? And this is one of our best-selling cover lines. Da, 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 da. But a lot of people were like, like the resounding feeling from both, the industry and consumers was like, oh my God, women's health is now not using these anymore. And they are not
Mm.
going to talk about bodies in this way. And what I always said in every interview was like, we still talk about if you want to have healthy weight loss, or you want to have a fitness routine, or you want to do that, you can still come here. I'm not saying, like those are in the magazine, but it's the way we talk about it. We aren't going to talk about you need to do it, you need to look like this, you need to be a certain size, etc. Blah blah blah. And so that became kind of like another pillar of the brand, where
Mm.
it was and so we did that. But then the big thing that we really did was in May 2016. And I have OCD. I was never been like private about it personally. It's not like I was ever writing. No one was writing about mental health or their own mental health, right? And so at the time, I was being presented by my editors with a bunch of statistics about the rising rates of anxiety in women and how bad it was, et cetera. And I was like, you know what? You hear these stats, they come in, they go out, like, oh, it's terrible. And then you move on. I'm like, we gotta, and this is like, sounds so obvious now, but at the time it really wasn't. Like, we gotta like put face to the name. Like, what if I come out
Mm.
and say, I'm the editor of Women's Health and I have OCD and like this and that. And I want everyone else to like, so we ended up photographing 14 women. This spread, it was like, which of these women has a mental illness? We flipped and we're like, all of them, including me. I'm the editor of Women's Health. And it was this giant report. And it was where I sort of thought about how a story can become a movement, because it was like, then we had a digital center, then we did a social arm. We had like 8 partners. We were partnered with NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We did a survey with them, the JED Foundation, the Clinton Foundation. I was on the Today Show talking to Willie Geist about my OCD. There's a TikTok meme. It's over now, but it was like, this is going to be the personality for the rest of my life. It's kind of a joke, but I mean, I was like, I have become the accidental poster child of OCD. And so that's where I really started getting in the mental health sphere and really forming relationships with, NAMI and these organizations and et cetera. And when I left Women's Health, I started looking around the field and being like, it's real interesting when you look at mental health coverage. You either get sort of very serious,
Mm.
from like mental health editorial or like Cleveland Clinics of the world and Mayo Clinic and symptom lists and this and that. And it's like black and white photos and people are crying. And it was pretty dire. And if you still look in stock photography and type in depression, you will get pictures of people in fetal, like, and it's like, well, that can happen. But like, it's also like, this is depression, It's like, why can't I have like real deep, raw, normal talk, but I don't want pictures of people crying in black and white? Like, why can't I have the poppy, the visual tone of a women's lifestyle brand or even a fashion brand, and deep journalism and like real talk? Like, this is true. This is happening. Like, we don't need to kid gloves it, and that was in 2018. And I started the Club Mental Instagram. And then I got some other jobs, blah, blah, blah. And I would go in and out. And then in 2022, after my last big corporate role, I was like, it's the time. And I was like, am I too late now? Like, I've waited 4 years. It's been 4 years, but there still wasn't anything, even 4 years later.
Mm.
So in some ways, I'm like, why didn't I start this 4 years ago when I first, like, it would be so established, et cetera. But I think sadly, the pandemic has allowed people to understand that it's kind of okay to talk about it. Like, a lot's changed.
Mhm.
People write about it, people talk about it. It's still, I think what the next, front of mental health is the normalization, literally John Fetterman just like went into inpatient for depression and everyone's like, and it's like, well, if he had a diabetes episode, he would have gone
Yeah.
to the hospital. If he had a heart issue, if he had a rheumatoid arthritis flare, he would have gone. And yes, there are particular things around mental health, but like, he went to the hospital to treat his situation just as someone would for physical health. And why are that, it's still just like, and so my goal with mental is to be lifestyle and mental health. Like, you
Hmm.
see the photos are poppy, they're unexpected. They're not, I don't want anything to be flip. I want to, it's always thoughtful. Like, it, there's a curated marketplace of product. I have this idea of like radically reimagining sort of like beauty and lifestyle products as mental health management tools. And I've talked to tons of experts about this. And I, um, you know, looked over 60 clinical studies to do this. And it's like, okay, none of these are cures, right? Like you have a mental health issue, like you're not going to get this like turtleneck and like all of a sudden, I'm fine. No, but like a woman who has bipolar told me she buys the same Everlane turtleneck in 8 colors and hangs it in her closet because guess what? Then she can reach for it in the morning and she's not stressed out. She can dress it up and down. That's a daily coping tool that people aren't thinking about. There was a study we found. It's like you're reading through the bowels of these studies, and it's like blue light blocking glasses don't just help people sleep better, they can actually reduce mania symptoms in people with bipolar. I mean, that's like, get blue light blocking glasses, people. Like, it's symptom free, beauty products. It's like most therapists will tell you their like routine is very good for calming anxiety and issues, and like beauty can be seen as a routine. Is that skin cream gonna like make you like not have borderline personality disorder? No, but like there are so many studies around stress and skin and like the physiological reactions of a mental health issue. And, I have, like I said, OCD, and I have contamination OCD, which is the kind that people often think of where you are scared of germs and you wash your hands, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, I will tell you what the best hand cream is because I tested them all. And so, like, that applies to a bigger audience too. I don't like to pack my shoes. I don't want my shoes in my luggage touching my clothes. Well, why can't I have a cool shoe bag? Why do I have to have the ugly one? And a lot of the products marketed to mental health are very clinical, very sterile, or they're not marketed to mental health. There's a skin picking condition called dermatillomania. I actually have that. It's associated with OCD. I do it in my ear. It's really weird. I don't know why. And it's but people often pick at their skin, the facial skin or their arm, etc., to the point where it bleeds, they have scabs, etc. What could they use? Oh, concealer. They want concealer. They want things like this. But you go to anyone's concealer page, you cannot read a description that says this is safe for dermatillomania because it doesn't contain alcohol, or it will cover blah, 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 or this and that. And so that's the kind of stuff I want to bring forward as just an adjunct other way to cope, and look at things. And I think when you do that, you normalize it because everybody uses concealer, right? Like, oh, she needs concealer. I do too. It's like when we think of things that way, when we look at things that way, and when we see people doing their everyday lives, but they're also talking about having grown up with generational trauma and this and that. And, I feature a lot of young women who talk about their mental health issues, but also talk about, and then I wrote this book of poetry, and then I've done this, and I'm married, and I have this kid. It's like, it's all together. It's not mental health and my life. It's like they're all together. So that's my goal.
I think, and it's the thing I've enjoyed the most about this conversation and getting to know you is like you were destined to do this. And like, from the high school first time you experienced the power of a story to influence change and help people, like that was always there. And you go through your 20 plus year career of acquiring all of these additional skills through all of these, whether it's modeling through editor-in-chiefs that you've worked for before, the beauty, editor kind of experiences you had to understand the deeper meaning behind, a simple story, has culminated in this mission of mental and what you're doing for mental health. So like, it's inspiring to see it kind of come full circle and see you doing exactly what you have been designed, like destined to do from the beginning.
I feel
and
like
it's just such a cool story.
You're going to be that guy who like actors go on with and they cry because who's that guy? Because
but it's such a cool story, Amy.
I
Like
haven't really
and it's
thought
not
of it
smoke.
that
Yeah,
way.
but it's cool. Like it's like you
Yeah.
think about that moment and it's just something small about getting new uniforms. How that was like the catalyst for making it okay to talk about mental health in a way that's not clinical and normalizing it. And the change the impact you're going to have in the world for doing that was started based on uniforms. Like, that is so cool. That is so cool.
Well, if Coach Kassane is watching, that was my best.
Yeah, yeah. And
But
I
we
know
have it.
I know I've taken a lot of your time, but I want to end on like this. People see your online persona, they see LinkedIn, they see, mental and kind of your fingerprints and voice in there. What would you want people to know about you that they can't see from LinkedIn or any of your online personas?
I mean, I'm pretty open. I talk about things, but I mean, I think what I would want people to know is like there's been a lot of failures. There's been a lot of moments of like I suck, nobody cares. Um and I've gone through those moments of in between jobs where you aren't Amy from Allure or you aren't Amy from Women's Health. You're just Amy. And it can be really hard. I mean, it's kind of upsetting sometimes because you're like, "Oh, now you don't care." Um, but what you see is a lot of people do care, and it really can strengthen you. And in those moments are when I do my best networking and my best reaching out to people. And so I think if you're like, it's not happening. I mean, it's sort of like, I don't want to compare myself to a Hollywood actor, but it's like people be like, they're an overnight success. And it's like, no, 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 they've been doing it for 20
Mm,
years. Like you just didn't
mhm,
see it. Like you didn't see the moments where they're literally crying in bed on the pillow, being like, nobody cares. And so I think we all have those moments and we don't talk about them as much as we should. And there are even places where I don't even want to go by showing that, like myself, literally, but I'm trying to get there because I think the more you see that from people, the more you're like, it's normal to go through these ups and downs and it's normal to cycle through. Like, I think particularly now, careers aren't what they once were. You may have to reinvent yourself. I mean, I saw some interview with Stacey London and she was like, I'm on my fifth career. And I was like, yes, lady. Like I didn't think magazines were going to crater under me when I hit the top, but they did. And um, you got to be like, I'm going to do it again. And so I would say, I hope that leads me to a lesson in that it's all about relationships. I think you gotta like, not that you're asking for advice here, but like, I think when you're at your highs, right? When you're in these big jobs and blah, 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 and everybody cares, you don't keep up your other relationships around your full network because you're like, I'm good. You know what? Oh, of course, so and so. But then you need those relationships
mhm.
later. And you need to keep a dialogue going and you need to offer things to those people as well because you realize it in those moments. And I think one thing about like I would say Gen Z, like call some people because when it's all about text, and I love text, I don't want anyone to call my phone. I once was like joking with an editor at Women's Health where we were like, losemynumber.com. And this was like in like 2015 because it was like, don't call me. But like when I actually talk to people or Zoom with people, it just forms a new level of relationship. So um, I think Gen Z is like going to change the world with their social causes, but I urge them to have
I
conversations.
love that. On that note, I'm gonna thank you. I'm gonna end the recording, but like, thank you so much. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked today's episode, please follow along and hear more great stories from us. Make sure to follow Spark Recruiting on YouTube and LinkedIn. We'll see you next time.